Coming up on The World Today. Russia blames blasts on soldiers' mobile phone use. President Xi holds welcome ceremony for Philippines. An unusually high temperature in Bilbao after Spain's record-breaking past year. Welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. It's day 315 of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and here's what we know. We start off in Russia, where President Vladimir Putin has sent a frigate off the Atlantic Ocean armed with hypersonic Zircon cruise missiles. In a video conference with Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Igor Krochmal, commander of the frigate named Admiral of the Fleet of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, Mr. Putin said the ship was armed with Zircon hypersonic weapons. Mr. Shoigu said the Khrushchev would sail to the Atlantic and Indian Oceans and to the Mediterranean Sea.
This time, the ship is equipped with the latest hypersonic missile system, Zircon, which has no equivalent. This is a hypersonic sea-based system and other new weapons. Here and now, I want to thank, first of all, the specialists in the defense industry complex who created and started mass production of this unique weapon. As I've said already, there is no equivalent in any country in the world. I am sure that this powerful weapon will allow Russia to protect itself from potential external threats reliably and will help us serve our country's national interests. I am very glad. My congratulations. This is a very big collective piece of work which ended up with a good result as expected. Begin your task.
Let's go now to the front lines, where foreign fighters backing Ukrainian soldiers trained near Russian-controlled Crimea in the Donetsk region Tuesday. The International Legion, called the Carpathian 6th Battalion, is made up of a dozen soldiers of various nationalities and is split into 3 companies, one Spanish-speaking, another English-speaking, and the last one Ukrainian-speaking. The commander, who goes by his war name, that said the foreign volunteers were crucial for the fight against Russia. Front lines have scarcely budged for weeks, with most intense fighting raging around the city of Bakhmut, described by commanders on both sides as a meat grinder. Russian forces are literally trying to advance over the corpses of their own soldiers toward Bakhmut, and the military situation there remains the most difficult. Ukrainian military commander-in-chief General Valery said that the province, which along the neighboring Donetsk forms remains the most difficult. Now, it is claimed that steady advances are in the direction of Russian-held Svatov and also Crimea. And French President Emmanuel Macron and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson reaffirmed their support for Ukraine as they met yesterday in Paris. The Swedish leader chose Paris for his first trip abroad after Sweden, January 1st, took the presidency of the European Union for 6 months. Both leaders also discussed Sweden's application to join NATO, along with its neighbor Finland. Macron said he wished to see the bid succeed as soon as possible. Nuclear energy was another item Mr. Macron and Kristersson were set to go over.
We will talk about our determination to keep on answering the Russian aggression of Ukraine as winter sets in and Ukrainians need our support now more than ever. We will also go over Sweden's request to join NATO, which I would like to see succeed as soon as possible, along with that of Finland. I want to say it again here, you can count on France's support and solidarity. I would like to be able to work together in order to give our partnership new and very concrete ambitions in fields such as security, space, energy, nuclear, forests, and healthcare. For the coming years, we have yet to define a bilateral cooperation agenda that goes beyond our common European goals.
Sweden is, as you all know, taking over the presidency at a time when the European Union is hit by several parallel crises. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is, of course, the very worst. Ukrainian victory is existential for Europe and for the entire world. But we must also meet the energy crisis, the climate crisis, the soaring inflation, as well as to safeguard long-term European competitiveness.
Well, the unauthorized use of mobile phones by Russian soldiers led to the deadly Ukrainian rocket attack in Makiivka January the 1st. This according to Moscow's military, raising the death toll. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow is planning full-scale mobilization and is set to launch a major offensive. Russia has previously denied it is mobilizing more troops. To talk some more about the situation. Joining us now is Dr. Michael Ogu, Department of Political Science, Public Administration, Babcock University. He joins me now from London. It's good to see you. First, tell us your take on how the war in Ukraine started in 2023.
Yeah, hi, Millicent. Happy New Year. It's nice to be here as well. So the war in Ukraine is actually just like you projected, 315 days, less than just about 50 days, and then it's 1 year since there has been bombardments in Ukraine. And I think that, sadly, but interestingly too, the way that the way that Ukraine celebrated marked the new year for Russia was something that is quite intriguing with the Makiivka. The bombardment in the Russian occupied territory, which of course there's still a lot of controversy as to how many people, the Russian soldiers who were casualties in that bombardment. But I think it's very important because this particular attack or counterattack, by Ukraine, happens to be, in my own opinion, an embarrassment to Russia, or it feels like an embarrassment to Russia because Russia, of course, sees itself as being on top of the situation, so to be able to suffer this kind of attack, on the New Year's Day when, they should have been celebrating and counting their victories, being able to suffer the deadliest attack so far since the war started, on Russian soldiers. I think it's something that, Russia, it's not something that's causing Russia to pull back a bit and think, and think about the strategies going forward. So it's a sad event. I mean, the fact that the war has lingered this long is quite unfortunate. But I think it's quite an interesting turn of events, especially to begin this year, 2023.
Indeed, we can see visuals of some of the family members, laying flowers there. In the Donetsk region. But it's also interesting to note that many wonder if Russia's anger will grow over this latest incident and what is to come. This is also on the side of what we've heard today. Russia sending a supersonic, is it hypersonic Zircon missile to the Atlantic, and many wondering, what his plans are.
Yeah, just like I said, the Russian side would be caused to do an evaluation of their the strategies of their warfare going forward. So definitely we're going to see some more. This has largely provoked, it will definitely provoke the Russian side, and we might begin to see some more dynamics play out in the coming days. So the Ukrainian side should not be too surprised because they should expect that Russia would retaliate, to some extent. But I think that it's important also to know that the Ukrainian side is not also backing down. with the support that they continue to receive from the West, the US and allies, I think they are also rising to the occasion, and they're becoming more and more decisive in their quest for their own freedom and for their to keep their independence. So it is going to be nice to see how it plays out, but of course we all pray that the war ends as soon as possible. But the coming days would be something to look forward to.
Right, but then, it is winter, and some say that Ukraine appears to be winning the war with the latest efforts and the onslaughts, with the weapons that they have. Would you describe it as that? Both sides are inflicting major bombardments, and no one is sort of peddling.
Yeah, we'll not call this one incident, on January 1st by Ukraine as a victory, even though of course it was a significant milestone, for the Ukrainian side in this conflict. But that single event will not qualify as a victory for Ukraine, in this conflict. Even though, like you said, the both sides have been using, especially Russia, has been using the winter as a weapon on the Ukrainians, shutting down all the power, as many power stations as they can, crippling the energy supply and all of that. So they seem to be capitalizing on the winter, and the harsh weather conditions to inflict more harm, particularly on civilians, and I was reading some reports a few days ago, which says that the Russian side continues to target civilian territory, the areas where civilians are more populated. So it appears that Russia is beginning to act like a wounded dog, that is just trying to pull everything down on its way to, so that is something that is worrisome, because if the war deteriorates to an extent where civilians are being targeted indiscriminately, then of course that will raise the toll of civilian casualties, and there'll be so much more humanitarian need and aid and all of that. So I hope that Russia doesn't continue in that trajectory. And so far Ukraine has been the battlefield, because all of these casualties that we are talking about, are going on in Russian occupied territories of Ukraine. So there's really nothing happening on the Ukrainian soil, which of course puts them at an advantage. So yes, the two sides are not backing down. And like I said, the Ukrainian side is getting as much help as it needs, but of course perhaps not enough, to stand up to Russia sufficiently. Which of course I think which is something we should also look forward to, and hopefully they continue to receive as much help as they need, because they will need a lot of that going forward.
We hear that air raid sirens in Kyiv are sounding right now. Russia launching fresh drone attacks in Kyiv in Ukraine. Let's look at the projections. Do you expect more West backing for Ukraine in this year, financially and otherwise?
Well, yeah, that's the only way. That's the only way, perhaps, that Ukraine can survive, because there's really no infrastructure in Ukraine at the moment, and so the only way that they can continue to rise to the occasion in this conflict is by the help that they get, particularly from the US. Some reports a few days ago, or last week, I think, said that the US budget for 2023 has already earmarked some 45 million or $1 billion for aid to Ukraine, and that's aside the almost 50 billion rather that has been spent this year alone, and of course some 48% or so on military aid alone. So it just shows how much invested the US particularly is in this conflict, and I think that that support would continue largely because, of course, this war in Ukraine, directly and indirectly, and especially from the indirect aspect, also brings in the West. It's a campaign against the West by Russia. So I think that the US has interests, in this conflict, and they will continue to support Ukraine, and I'm sure that other allies of the US will also continue to support Ukraine. And we can see that in the recent visit that the Ukrainian president made to the US, which of course is a different discussion entirely. But I think that Ukraine will continue to enjoy the support that they're enjoying, and that would be perhaps one of the significant factors in whether they're going to come out of this war victorious, or at least keeping their freedom and independence intact.
Which points towards the proxy nature of this war. Will we see more sanctions for Russia, do you think? I know last year there were over 5,000 sanctions by the international community for Russia.
Yeah, the issue of sanctions, I don't quite think that we'll see more sanctions, because of course the world has understood that Russia is not intimidated by the sanctions, because of course if sanctions could solve the problem, then the war should be over by now with all the sanctions that we saw in 2022. So I don't think that sanctions from outside would be, I'm not sure we'll see a lot of sanctions from outside. From outside, I mean outside of Russia, the West and the allies of the West sanctioning Russia and all that. I don't think we'll see a lot of that this year, because we have already seen how that played out last year. But what I think would be significant this year is the criticism from within Russia itself, because of course, as we see, the attack, the January 1 attack, is already raising criticisms by Russians, especially Russians who are pro-war, who are supporting the war, are beginning to criticize the government and the military as to their incompetence and their lackadaisical attitude, and how they were able to let this happen. So I think that more of such criticism from within Russia would be what would be significant this year, to either cause the Russian state to back down, or and I'm just watching to see how that will play out, because the more Russians become dissatisfied with what is going on, and the more they begin to complain, or they continue to complain about it, then the more the Russian administration is forced to listen. So that is a new dimension which I think would be very, very important for us to look forward to, and I'm sure it's going to also have a lot of impact on the war as well going forward.
We want to appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Dr. Makiivka, Department Political Science, Public Administration, Babcock University. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we are hearing that a little-known patriotic group that supports the widows of Russian soldiers are calling on President Putin to order a large-scale mobilization of millions of men and close the borders to ensure victory in Ukraine. This is as the unauthorized use of mobile phones by Russian soldiers led to the deadly Ukrainian rocket attack. That's coming from Russia. Here's more in this report. Russia's defense ministry has acknowledged that 89 servicemen had been killed in the Ukrainian attack on Makiivka and the Moscow-controlled parts of the Donetsk region. The strike just after midnight on New Year's Day on a school that was converted into military quarters in Makiivka has spurred anger among Russian nationalists and some lawmakers questioning the military strategy used there. Russia previously said 63 Russian soldiers were killed.
Unfortunately, having sifted through the rubble of the reinforced concrete structures, the number of our comrades who died increased to 89. Among the dead is the deputy commander of the regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Baturin. All the victims and the families of the dead servicemen are being provided with all the necessary assistance and support.
Ukraine had also mentioned that 400 soldiers were killed and another 300 wounded in the attack. The first deputy chief of the main military political directorate of the Russian armed forces also blamed troops using their mobile phones as the main reason for the attack. He said there was a ban in place against use of phones in a strike zone.
At the present time, a commission is working to investigate the circumstances of the incident, but it is already obvious that the main reason for what happened was the switching on and mass use by personnel, contrary to the ban in place, of mobile phones in a strike zone accessible to enemy weapons. This factor allowed the enemy to track and determine the coordinates of the soldier's location for a missile strike.
виновные должностные лица будут привлечены к ответственности.
According to him, necessary steps are being taken to prevent similar tragic incidents from happening in the future, and those officials found guilty will be brought to justice. Meanwhile, emergency workers are still clearing the rubble of a building in the city of Makiivka days after it was shelled. The New Year's Eve strike by Ukrainian forces at the vocational college for Russian troops marks one of the bloodiest incidents in the war so far. Russian nationalists and some lawmakers have demanded punishment for the commanders they accused of ignoring dangers. Critics said the soldiers were being housed alongside an ammunition dump at the site, despite commanders knowing it was within range of Ukrainian rockets. On Tuesday, several Russian cities held rallies to commemorate Russian military personnel killed in shelling in the Russian-controlled Ukrainian city. Mourners laid flowers on Samara, Toliati, and other Russian cities where some of the drafted Russian soldiers killed on Sunday had come from. Many of those at the rallies held flags of the ruling United Russia Party. Still to come on the program. Italy takes in 85 migrants after tightening rules on asylum seeker rescue ships. That's in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. China's President Xi Jinping today held a ceremony to welcome Philippine President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. for his state visit to China. President Marcos was greeted with a 21-gun salute. Peng Liyuan, wife of Qi Wang Yi, a member of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China, CPC, Central Committee and State Councillor, and He Lifeng, a member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Committee and Vice Chairman of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, attended the ceremony. Mr. Marcos was accompanied by his wife, Liza Araneta Marcos, former Philippine president and senior deputy speaker of the House of Representatives and speaker of the House of Representatives of the Philippines. The military band played national anthems of the Philippines and China. Accompanied by Mr. Xi, Marcos reviewed the Guard of Honor of the Chinese People's Liberation Army and watched a march past. At the invitation of President Xi, his counterpart, Marcos, is paying a state visit to China from January the 3rd to the 5th. And we're off to the United States, where Republican Kevin McCarthy's bruising quest to become Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives enters a second day today, with the party's new majority fractured by a revolt among hardline members of his party who oppose his candidacy. Republican Kevin McCarthy vowed Tuesday to remain in the race to be the powerful U.S. House of Representatives Speaker, hours after hardline members of his party blocked his bid to lead their brand new majority. There was a disconcerting start for the new Republican majority and highlights the challenges the party could face over the next 2 years, heading into the 2024 presidential election. The slim 222 to 212 majority gives greater clout to a small group of hardliners who want rule changes that would give them greater control over the speaker and more influence over the party's approach to spending and the debt.
California has received 200 and purpose does the gentleman from the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 203. The Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 19.
I rise to nominate Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House.
The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 202. The Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 20. No person having received the majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. The House stands adjourned until noon tomorrow.
Those of us who will not be voting for Kevin McCarthy today take no joy in this discomfort that this moment has brought. But if you want to drain the swamp, you cannot put the biggest alligator in charge of the exercise.
And they even came to the position where one, Matt Gaetz, said, I don't care if we go to plurality and we elect Hakeem Jeffries and it hurts the new frontline members not to get reelected. Well, that's not about America. And I will always fight to put the American people first, not a few individuals that want something for themselves. So we may have a battle on the floor, but the battle is for the conference and the country, and that's fine with me.
If you win, how do you unify the conference after this?
Political commentator Adam Roosevelt joins me now for more on the U.S. speakership situation. Hi, Adam, and compliments of the new year to you. Did you expect what happened at the U.S. House after Kevin McCarthy lost the speaker votes?
Well, first, Happy New Year to you and the folks out there in Lagos, and it's a pleasure to be with you. First, I will say that I have been a part of the National Republican Congressional Committee 218 program for several number of years. I know how the Republican conference works, but it has been 100 years since we faced a dilemma like this, where a nominee for the speaker has not gone forward successfully. So I don't think we anticipated it, but within the internal politics of the Republican Party, the factions are now being formed. You've got the Trump factions, you've got the traditional Republicans, you've got Reagan Republicans, but the Trump faction is the new factor today. And how Representative Kevin McCarthy performed during the January 6 investigations, during the last 8 years. This is what we're now looking at in terms of his ability to lead the Republican Party, given that Trump has now taken the mantle. So he is being judged for his performance during the Trump years and then during the time where the former Speaker of the House, Pelosi, was in charge of the gavel.
So Mr. McCarthy facing rebellion from within his own ranks. To think that the start of the new Congress was supposed to be a victory lap for the Republican Party, as it took control of, the lower chamber following November's elections.
Well, if you think about just recently the election, the anticipation and the hope was that the Republican Party would not just take the House, but they would also take more than just the House in terms of the seats. So guess what we have? We have a majority, but we did not get the red wave. Who is to blame for that? They are blaming certain leaders in the party for this dissatisfaction in leadership. So the red wave did not happen. So that is an impact to the next presidential election. So now they would want to focus on making sure there is a person in the Republican conference in leadership position to effectively lead the party forward. And I will say there are more issues today. We saw Roe versus Wade with women's rights. The Republicans are going to fight uphill for this because now the women are coming out in droves to protect their rights to choose for abortion. Republicans are championing the issue there, but they may not be on the right aisle depending on which factions are pro-life or the other side of the issue. So this is the issue today, but there's an aggregation of issues that must be addressed. But Kevin McCarthy, third round, I don't know if he's going to take it.
Before today, what do you see him doing? He says he's not backing down. And what do you think of possible opponents to his role for speakership?
Well, I'll say the former president, President Donald J. Trump, has just came out and made statements saying support Representative McCarthy. That is a very strong indicator that if President Trump is asking, he's going to be making one-on-one phone calls. I think that Kevin McCarthy is going to fight because he's now received the endorsement of the president, but it may not be enough. The faction that stands with President Trump may fight for him, regardless of if they've been asked to support. So I think now he is the majority leader, Kevin McCarthy. So we must keep that in mind. It doesn't mean his political career is over, but it definitely means that if he loses in front of the nation for such a position such as this, he would be at odds with the folks who effectively stood up against him. So I think we're in a very dangerous position. Let me lastly say that there have been nominations. So we looked at today, Congressman Chip Roy nominated Jim Jordan. Okay. Jim Jordan nominated Kevin McCarthy, but now you see people breaking rank and they're looking at Jim Jordan potentially as the candidate for speaker. So we must look at who may be the alternative, and Jim Jordan looks like he might be.
How would you weigh the situation with the Democrats? Hakeem Jeffries received 212 votes in all 3 rounds.
Well, I firstly want to say congratulations. The American people have made their decision through their elected representatives. So regardless of what side of the aisle, it shows that the process to elect these leaders within this process is working. But I do not believe it will go to the vote this far where Hakeem Jeffries could effectively become the speaker. I don't think that the threat that Matt Gaetz made in terms of allowing Hakeem Jeffries to become speaker, if in fact Kevin McCarthy continued to fight, some people believe that Matt Gaetz and his group of coalition would just allow for this failure and the Republican Party takes a hit, which would allow and open up opportunity for Representative Hakeem Jeffries. So again, it's interesting, but I don't think he'll have this position, but we will definitely see how far this Republican group will go to see their objective accomplished.
And perhaps that was my other question. You said that we haven't seen this in over 100 years in the U.S. history, but then with the negotiations, with the perhaps what some would call lobbying, how long could this go on for? I mean, if there is no clear majority today as well.
Well, I think, today there's going to be another conversation. I think if latest has to be Friday, President Trump is now coming out. There are going to be some concessions. If you recall, Matt Gaetz and 2 other members engaged some folks within the Republican conference to demand that they have committee positions, demand that they have positions of authority. So I think President Trump will be heavily involved in negotiating this. The calls are already happening. The conversations are already happening. The concessions are already being made, and demands are being made from the Trump faction and different groups within the Republican Party. So I would say let's not hope too far, but Friday at latest, if it goes into next week, Republican Congress will not be able to move forward. Congress cannot operate as normal. So they need to get this done quickly, no later than Friday.
We'll continue to watch the developments. Thanks a lot, political commentator Adam Roosevelt. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Go to other stories now. 85 migrants rescued at sea by NGO vessel Geo Barents disembarked in the port of Toronto today, a week after Italy's right-wing coalition government approved measures to find charities to rescue migrants at sea. According to the decree, charity ships should request a port and sail to it without delay after a rescue rather than remain at sea looking for other migrant boats in distress. Captains breaching these rules risk fines of up to €50,000, and repeated violations can result in the impoundment of the vessel. Since taking office in October, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government has targeted activities of sea rescue charities, accusing them of facilitating the work of people traffickers amid a surge in arrivals. Pope Francis has referred to former Pope Benedict as a great master of catechesis. The pontiff told several thousand people at the start of his weekly audience at the Vatican, in which he's concluding a catechesis. Tomorrow, the Pope will preside at Benedict's funeral in St. Peter's Square before a crowd that Vatican police say will number in the tens of thousands. Former Pope Benedict will be buried according to his wishes in the same spot in the crypts under St. Peter's Basilica, where Pope John Paul II was originally interred in 2005 before his body was moved on to a chapel in the Basilica in 2011. Meanwhile, here's how preparations are going for the former Pope's burial. Today marks the third and last day of public viewing of Pope Benedict XVI's body at St. Peter's Basilica ahead of his funeral tomorrow. Benedict XVI was a towering theologian and hero to conservative Catholics. In 2013, he became the first Pope in 600 years to resign instead of reigning for life. Yesterday night, about 135,000 people had filed past the former Pope, who was been lying in state without any papal regalia on the Catholic raised bier before the Basilica's main altar. The decision not to have them during the public viewing appeared to have been decided to underscore that he no longer was Pope when he died December 31 at the age of 95. The viewing is due to end today, 7 p.m, and shortly afterwards, his body will be placed in a coffin made of cypress wood. The coffin will be placed on the ground near the outside steps of St. Peter's Basilica, and the faithful will say the rosary before the funeral mass begins. Well, let's go back to what's going on in the United States. Later today, the U.S. House speakership situation. Joining us is our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird. Hi, Maria. Give us a roundup of activities yesterday and what we are to expect today.
Well, yesterday, 3 votes floor, which is historic, unprecedented. It's quite interesting that we have not seen this type of fight for speakership since 1923, and we're now in 2023. And so we are seeing that this is something that many legislators have never seen before, are very clear with steps. They're hoping that when they come back in just a few moments now, in a little less than 15 minutes, they'll be back on the floor to be able to conduct another vote, that will end in some sort of a decision for a speaker. Now, we know that there are 2 other individuals that potentially could be candidates, specifically the congressman from Ohio, Jordan. And so that was one individual that received several votes yesterday when they did vote for the Speaker of the House. We also know that when Representative McCarthy ran, he did receive close to the number of votes twice, the same number of votes, but one time he did receive 1 less vote. And so the concern is that he would potentially be losing steam and would not be able to secure the votes needed. And the longer that this plays out, the less likely is that he will be able to be the next Speaker for the House. And so that question comes, then who will be that individual that would be able to have the consensus of the GOP conference to move forward so that the Senate so that the Congress can move forward, which then will allow us to move forward with legislation. The other concern is that if it's this type of challenge and battle as it relates to just choosing a speaker, specifically choosing McCarthy, would he have a challenge with further legislation and bills that need to be brought forth and crossing the finish line?
Maria, thanks. We look forward to more updates, especially as they meet very shortly. Thanks again. Still to come on the program. Football legend Pele is laid to rest at world's tallest vertical cemetery. We have more in the report. Europe after registering the highest average temperature since at least 1916 last year amid consecutive heat waves. Spain started 2023 with very warm weather, especially in the north, where thermometers were more than 7 degrees centigrade above normal. That's according to Spain's national weather agency, AMET. Temperatures broke some local records for the month of January on the 1st of January, with the mercury hitting 25.1 Celsius at the Bilbao airport in the country, a temperature which would be normal for the area in the summer. Today, Bilbao reached 16 degrees Celsius, with locals enjoying the sun near the Guggenheim Museum. Tourists also were pleased with the warm temperatures, but at the same time worried about climate change. Let's head to Africa, where Mozambique has replaced Kenya at the UN Security Council with a promise to prioritize the fight against terrorism. The country will serve at the council as a non-permanent member for the next 2 years. Mozambique has been battling an Islamist insurgency in its northern Cabo Delgado province for the past 5 years. According to official data, the conflict has displaced over 1 million people and killed approximately 4,000 others. Mr. Commissaro said the country would also push for reforms at the Security Council to address African concerns. The Security Council has 5 permanent members: the United States, Russia, France, the United Kingdom,
we are confident
China,
that these 5 new
non-permanent members.
As an elected member, we will therefore attach great importance to situations that constitute serious threats to peaceful existence of states in the 21st century. Paramount among contemporary threats to international peace and security is the progressive Africanization of terrorism affecting our continent.
And to health, authorities in Ghana are set to toughen entry restrictions from the 6th of January, citing an increase in COVID-19 cases in China. All air travelers arriving from China will now be required to present a negative PCR COVID test result not older than 48 hours before departure and undergo another test on arrival in Ghana's Katoke International Airport at no cost. The Ghana Airports Company Limited, which announced the updated guidelines on its website, adds that all persons arriving in Ghana who are fully vaccinated will be exempted from any form of testing done either prior to boarding from an originating country or on arrival in Ghana, except passengers originating their journey from China. According to the company, non-Ghanaians traveling to Katoke International Airport with fake vaccination certificates will be quarantined and returned to the point of boarding at their cost. It also is quoted as saying that airlines that bring passengers to Ghana who are not fully vaccinated or passengers originating their journey from China without a valid negative COVID-19 PCR test result 48 hours prior to departure would be surcharged $3,500. And let's take you now to Egypt, where hundreds of school children gathered in the Grand Museum to turn piles of Lego blocks into renewable energy structures. From wind turbines to cars powered by solar energy, teams of children aged 4 to 6 competed in the first Lego League Discover.
It's the 6th edition of the first Lego League, and children are busily sorting Lego for their project. The aim of this edition is to find solutions for storing, distributing and transporting renewable energy by creating Lego structures. 400 pupils are divided into 80 teams of 5 from 9 Egyptian governorates. Each team has had 3 months to think of the idea and train ahead of the competition.
السنة دي الموضوع عن الطاقة. They
are fully aware of the sources of energy, how to save and distribute energy, and how to transport it. Through this competition, children are also learning team building, and problem-solving skills.
It is a very unique opportunity for the children that they get to know more about sources of renewable energy and to understand this through Lego blocks. They learn how to build turbines and understand different types of renewable energy in more detail. For children between the ages of 5 and 7, it is honestly a great experience to know all this and to share the knowledge with society in the future, hopefully. The championship is being held at the Grand Egyptian Museum next to the Giza pyramids. The new museum's official opening is expected to take place this year. This year's theme focuses on energy and how children can find solutions for sustainable and clean sources of energy, how to store and distribute it, and also how to save energy. Parents and organizers watch as the children display their creations.
Ele é o atleta do século e foi grande jogador, o melhor do mundo. E eu vi que eu tenho 86 anos.
Brazilian football legend Pele was laid to rest Tuesday at a vertical cemetery following a 24-hour wake held at the Urbano Clodeira Stadium, the home ground of Pele's former team Santos. Tens of thousands of Brazilians lined along the streets as his casket, carried by a fire engine, arrived for private burial service at the Memorial Cemetery, which is the tallest vertical cemetery in the world with 14 stories. Many have hailed the life of a player who exploded onto the world scene as a 17-year-old at the 1958 World Cup before going on to have a spellbinding career as the sport's leading icon. The football legend was buried at the ground floor of the cemetery, which, according to Pele's family, will make it easier for fans to pay tribute to him.
Olha aqui, Lula! Lula, aqui tudo bem.
Vai deixar atrás, não.
Well, you'll see more of those final moments as the world bid him goodbye, and Sports at 6 that's coming up next. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.